Welcome to the Rural Podcast interview. I am here with Sarah McComb-Turbitt, who is an amazing person, an amazing mom, an amazing artist, a marine biologist. I could go on and on, but I'm going to let Sarah introduce herself to us, and we're going to talk about art and entrepreneurship and anything else that comes to mind in the context of being a rural entrepreneur and beyond. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Chris.
So how do you want to start the conversation? The theme of this is rural entrepreneurship. So do you want to talk about, your journey that led you here? And maybe talk through it a bit of a rural entrepreneurship lens. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So a bit of my background is I was born in a small town in Ontario, about 15 minutes from where I'm currently living in Owen Sound. And ever since I was young, I was just obsessed with oceans and animals and animal behavior and just that like deep curiosity for what they could possibly be thinking as they navigate their world. So that's kind of the lens of which I kind of saw my options when I was in high school looking for what to do. I took art courses all throughout high school and loved it, but I applied to art schools, but I didn't really think of it as a serious career at the time. There's a lot of stigma with being an artist and the starving artist you hear get tossed around a lot. I still get tossed around a lot. But so I decided that I was going to go for marine biology, which was my other strong passion, and figured I could always paint as a hobby, but it's a little harder to do, marine science as a hobby. So I went to Dalhousie for 5 years. Did work on the longfin pilot whales. I have a paper released with Marie and Hal Whitehead. He wrote the book on the cultural lives of whales, which is a fabulous read, just absolutely stunning. And one thing I'll note when I was there is Wade and Robin Hughes are Australian wildlife photographers that picked up photography in their retirement to do these beautiful shots of underwater whales. And they did Hal's book cover. So while I was in Halifax and he had his book launch for this collection of his kind of part of his life's work, they came in person and their photographs are just absolutely stunning. So that's where I met them. Then I had an amazing opportunity to go to UBC for my grad school and work with Gentoo penguins down in the Falkland Islands. And this was just such an absolute dream. So my parents were a little discouraged. I was moving even further away, coast to coast from Ontario. But along that journey of doing science and loving it, like the field work was just absolutely incredible. And yeah, it was just really such a dream, especially because I was working with whales and penguins. Those are just very fun animals that I'd always dreamed about working with. But when I was at the Ornithological Congress in 2018, which is a giant bird conference in Vancouver, there was a group there called Artists for Conservation. And they had been contracted by the Smithsonian Museum to paint all 678, I think at the time, endangered bird species. And I think it was like 10 by 10 panels, oil, acrylic, watercolor, cut paper, carvings, just all sorts of art styles. And it just blew my mind, this mural. So there were artists there in person that you could talk to, and hearing about their lifestyle, their career, their goals, and how they use art to show elements of animal behavior that you can't necessarily capture with photographs. It really captivated me. And I had always kind of been chipping away at painting, as like a de-stressing part-time hobby. Had not sold a painting to date, but so this was back in 2018. I applied to be a membership with Artists for Conservation, got accepted as an associate member in 2019, and have since been invited in 2022 to be a signature member with them. But when I graduated my master's in 2020, February, right before the pandemic, my husband and I had been back home for Christmas that December. So about 2 months before I was wrapping up my graduate program, and a connection of his that I used to work for at a restaurant had a triplex that was for sale. And we were on this kind of precipice of life decisions because I had job offers in the marine biology path, but this art path was really interesting. And by us moving from Vancouver back to Ontario, closer to our small town, with this triplex option, we could really financially make it work, that I could have some breathing room to play around with this and see if we could get it up and running. And my husband, he's been a lifelong entrepreneur. He had his own company that grew to 13 people. So he was so encouraging of that path and of the patience it takes to start something up from scratch, and just really threw his full confidence behind it as a path. So then we found ourselves calling our parents and being like, hey, we're going to move back to Owen Sound. And they were absolutely shocked. So,
and happy, I would imagine, very happy.
Yeah. So that's kind of the cliff notes of my story. And underlying all of this was we were then engaged and looking to start a family. And having grandparents around is just such invaluable support for that as well. So that's kind of how the motivation all came together to start my art business in a small town.
Yeah, it's interesting. It sounds like there was a bit of a spark when you initially saw the person that was taking pictures of the whales and was starting to, I don't know, visually just depict mammals. Like you had been studying them, but then you saw this guy taking pictures and, I don't know, bringing them to life. Was that the spark that started to show or I don't know, maybe what's the right word? Sort of give you the idea of bringing art and animals together? Is that, I mean, it sounds like that was sort of a couple of something that's stuck in your mind. Does that make sense?
Yeah, kind of. So when I was doing my field work with the longfin pilot whales, we had 3 roles on our ship and we partnered with a whale watch. So one person would be on photography, one person would be on data collection, and the other person would be the naturalist on board, talking to all the guests, answering questions about the pilot whales and other species we find. So I think my love of wildlife photography was seeded definitely with the Whitehead Lab. And just that rush of capturing a photo, especially with whales when they just pop up suddenly, you really gotta build that intuition when you're photographing animals. And then with Wade and Robin Hughes, seeing their underwater photography down in Australia was just stunning, because we don't take photographs like that on the east coast of Canada. I mean, you can, but our waters are so, productive and their visibility is not as great.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was definitely a crazy thing. And then actually, Damien Lugard, which is another professor at Dalhousie, he does stuff with gray seals. I should be saying doctor in front of all these names, but Dr. Damien Lugard, Dr. Marie, Dr. Hal, he's a photographer and an incredible one. And all his work features Sable Island, where he does his research. So he's really paired those activities well. And because it was known that I painted throughout the university, he asked me to co-plan the Society of Marine Mammals art exhibit back in, I think that would be 2016. Yeah. So we co-planned that. So I was on the conference committee of like 30 people, all these lifelong career scientists I really admired. And we had this small bit of it to help highlight the role of art and science together for like science communication. So it was mostly photography based. There was a bit of fine arts, but it was really fun getting to do that conference. And since I've been on the conference committee a couple times for their different shows. So that one was based in Halifax. Then it was in Barcelona. I wasn't involved in that one, but then it was in Florida, and I was the sole planner for the art exhibit down in Florida. Then I ended up being too pregnant to actually go in person, which was a little bit of a bummer, but yeah, all this balancing. Currently, I think this summer coming up, it's in Australia. So it jumps around everywhere.
Yeah. Now when did you actually come to the conclusion that you actually wanted to become a fine artist, a commercial fine artist, let's say, as opposed to a hobby fine? Like, how did you lead to that? Was there, what made you, when did that start? And was there anything else that happened that sort of where you went, yeah, okay, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to actively become a commercial artist, for lack of a better word?
Yeah, it was definitely, I had a conversation with David Kittler. I remember it so vividly. He's a wildlife artist based out in Alberta. So he was one of the artists that had a booth at the Ornithological Congress in Vancouver, when Artists for Conservation was presenting this stunning mural collection of all the species. And he was so open and transparent and welcoming. And we talked for maybe 20 minutes. And at the end, he just shook my hand and he was just like, well, you'll be a member at some point. And he just said it with such confidence that it really stuck with me. And I haven't reached out to him in a little bit. I just got back from Vancouver from live painting at the Artists for Conservation Festival in this past September. And I had 2 paintings in the show this year I'm on a 4-year streak for it, getting a painting in their top 200. And this year I had one in the 80 that gets selected for the live exhibit. Thank you so much. It was such a goal of mine to get, it was like a 5-year goal when I started painting full time, to get a painting into their juried exhibit, because these artists are just absolutely mind-blowing. Like I kind of feel like I've lost the starstruckness when I talk to other scientists, because I've been in that world. Whereas like for these artists who have really made it, and like some of them sell their paintings for tens of thousands of dollars, and you're just absolutely stunned at the beauty of their work and how they're able to convey the personalities of animals in what they're showing. So to be a part of them and to be consistently, reaffirmed that I belong in that group for the last 4 years has been just a crazy experience. And every time I go in person to the festival, it's so fun because people buy the art book there, and then they go around to all the artists that are live painting. And like the Saturday, there was 36 of us, I think. There was quite a few artists, and we're all talking to each other even more than we're live painting, because we're just so excited to hear about each other's businesses and how it's going and what you have coming up new. It's like that one time you really get to like see all your colleagues in person instead of just talking online. So we have people bring this book and they ask for your autographs, which is crazy, because normally when I'm painting in my, small town in my studio, in my room by myself, you don't have that kind of like affirming feedback, but you get a good dose of it anytime I go to this festival with them. So yeah, it's motivating.
Yeah. It sounds like, there's this very tight-knit group of artists around a common cause or a theme, which is animals and conservation, but they're very supportive.
Incredibly so.
Yeah. And I think you were telling me a while ago that there was some sort of support group that got together online, and was that part of the same group?
Separate. So This was my husband's early advice. I was a few months into starting my art business. This was still during the pandemic in 2020. And I had spent a month doing different things, like learning how to photograph work, a full month learning how to take out glare of your images, that whole process. Another month I did a Skillshare course just to play around with it, like seeing what branches of my business I could, play around with to try and get some more stable income, really into the business strategy of it. And we found this group called Artist Academy, run by a girl named Andrea. So she's based in the United States. And I've been a member since 2020 with them. But what's cool is that she asked if she could put my Skillshare course on her as part of her platform, because she liked the style and how I explained how I paint and stuff. And so I said, absolutely. And she's like, how long for? And I was like, I don't know, life, like, just take it. It's just the files. It's fine. And then she waived my monthly membership fee. So I've just been a member for free for forever, which is so fun because and how she explained it too. She was just like, she has a network of artists, but she wants to keep the established artists because we all help each other out. So it's so valuable for her when she's building that community to be like, you're a really good one. I'm going to hang on to you. So she really has facilitated this group. I think it's like 150 people in the advanced membership program. I'm not sure how many are, doing different things there, but she, it's just been really fun being a part of that tour. And then she has these live mural meetups where she plans a mural in a random country or a location in the States. And then it's understood by her client that it's a group mural. So then she has like 20 artists working on it. So I was lucky to take my son, he was 14 months at the time, by myself to the Dominican Republic. My parents thought I was absolutely mad. Even like days before, my mom was like, but I can watch him for the week. Like, you don't have to take him. But they're a little nervous about the adventure side of it. But no, I went down and it was just all people I knew from Instagram, from that community. And I had been talking to for years, supporting each other. Like somebody asks you, wow, that print looks awesome. How did you photograph that? And you tell them information, or, oh my God, this mural you did on the side of a grain, silo. How did you even start to quote that with the curved surface? How did you get your image on it? And people send like super long, detailed messages when you ask. And they're just so supportive of doing that. So it really gave me the confidence to dip into murals. And murals are really what sustained my business from a strategic standpoint for a little while there. Well, because canvases, when you paint them, you kind of have to wait for them to sell. Whereas if you get a mural client, it's a done thing. So sprinkling murals in and out of doing what you want on canvases is really wise for me anyway, because it creates, I have confidence now that if I ever need more money in my business, I could go pitch probably 3 to 5 businesses in town and I'd book a mural from it, almost certainly.
Yeah.
So it's kind of nice to have those different branches. So the Artist Academy by Andrea, she's great. And they also have a free Facebook group as well with other tips and advice. And she has a podcast that's free. So I've been on her podcast, I think 2 years ago, going over the whole story and how her group more directly influenced my career as an artist. And she pushed me to do murals for like 8 months before I was like, okay, fine, I'll try one. So she's been really, really encouraging. And a lot of the friends that I started with, they have a 100K club now where it's like a separate group from that. So it's people that she's watched grow a 6-figure art business. And she's had a 6-figure art business for a long time, but just really successful business-minded artists that you get all these tips and tricks with. So yeah, that would be the group I think you're thinking of.
Yeah, that's an extremely interesting story, because there are sort of two sources of contacts, right? There's local contacts and there's non-local contacts, and there's I feel in some cases, when you're thinking about building a network for your venture, for your passion or whatever, that you kind of stick to one or the other, as opposed to trying to figure out ways to leverage both. And you need to leverage both, digitally and analog. And the other thing that's interesting about that experience with what is it, Andrea?
Yeah.
Is value, the way that value is exchanged between people, traditionally has been economic. I pay you to do something for me, and whatever it is you do for me, great. I give you money, I get something. But there are other things that are very important, and there are sort of two other things, which is cultural and social value exchange. So cultural is basically, what do you know, what do you have that I can use? So in the case of Andrea, she said, hey, I'd love to use your content. I'd love to use your Skillshare courses and offer them to our members. And you said, sure. And she said, well, in exchange for that, I'd like for you to be a member for free. Really, and technically not free, because you're licensing your content, for lack of a better word, or giving access to it. And that's cultural. That's, that's something that you created. That's an asset of value that she used. And it's very smart, very smart. The other one is social. So it's kind of like, who do you know that you can introduce me to, in order for me to advance in some direction of value. And I find it reassuring and really kind of cool to hear that Andrea is thinking beyond the economics, because that's something that there's this multi view. It's almost like I think entrepreneurs need to think, in 3D,
Yeah.
as opposed to 1D. So 3D to me is, what are all these other ways in which I can exchange value because I don't have a lot of cash, right? And one way is, and I want to hold on to this person. I want to stay close to this person. I want to create a strong tie to this person. How can I do that? That's a very interesting story, and I really appreciate you sharing that with me.
Yeah.
We'll have a link to her community and all the other things that you talked about in the post that summarizes this podcast too. So
yeah,
give her
she
a
would
little
love
bit of
that.
yeah.
She has really built a strong community. And about a month after I joined with her was their first 31-day challenge. And that was in January, where you paint 31 animals in 31 days. I've done it 3 different years, slight variations to it. My second attempt, I got very, very morning sick with my first, and only got to 20 paintings. And then because I had a baby this past year, I just did it as however many paintings I could in 1 month. But what was different this past year is I reached out to Wildlife Preservation Canada, because I've been donating 15% of my original sales when I can. Some galleries have it negotiated differently when my work's placed in with them, because we take it off the top and then do other commissions afterwards, which is really nice of them to be flexible for being stubborn on the conservation donation part. And so we collaborated with Wildlife Preservation Canada, and we did as many endangered or at-risk Canadian species as we could this past January. And it was really amazing. I worked with Anne at the Grey Gallery locally, and she put on a fabulous opening exhibit. A bunch of the researchers, the director of Wildlife Preservation Canada, and a bunch of their scientists and their volunteers who gave me photographs for some of these really rare species that they've found in the field, all descended on Owen Sound. Like, they drove, from different cities in Ontario to our tiny town for the opening. And it was just such a really fun event. And that the success of that and those paintings were a huge decision in us being able to have a second child, because it just hit 2024, went off with a boom. And I just couldn't keep inventory. Even with the economic dip, it went really well for us. So by April, we were like, well, we already qualify for maternity leave the next time. I didn't pay into EI for my first, but we decided to do it when we were going to have a second. And with how best weeks work in that calculation, we already knew with some confidence that we'd get an amount, and then anything else I'd made between now and when baby comes in January just kind of raises that number up. So, and I think we've almost got it maxed, which is very exciting. So it's nice to have an adult income. I say an adult income because I was a student for a long time. And I think at UBC, grad students get 24 grand. So that was like my minimum achievement. But that's not really like an adult level income in my brain. So it's nice to be able to, feel like a breadwinner in your family still, when you have the flexibility to do all this.
Yeah. And couple things there that I want to talk about. The first thing, though, I do want to talk about is, you talked about the 31-day challenge, and there's a lot more to that in terms of, how you've used YouTube in the past, and how that's a channel and a vehicle for exposure. I mean, that's kind of that, and Instagram, because Teresa, my wife, follows you on Instagram, and she's telling me stuff, quite frequently what's going on. So I get the update quite frequently in terms of what you've been doing, which is cool. Yeah. And but the YouTube, so let's talk about YouTube, because you chose to, obviously, to use that as a channel. So how did that start? And tell me what it's been like.
Okay, so it does kind of circle back to the 31-day challenge, and how so this was the season that I got really morning sick. So this is January of 2022. And I had decided, I was not pregnant at the time, knowingly, in December, that I really wanted to make more Skillshare content. I had only put out 2 courses, I think, and they were doing fairly well, like about $30 a month from those courses. But what's fun is that you do the effort once and then it just pays you continuously. So I liked that idea of passive income, and we were trying to have a baby. So it was kind of in the back of my mind that I was like, I'm going to do something that sets us up a bit better for the future when baby comes. So that was kind of the motivation, is chasing the passive income streams. So in additionally to the 31-day painting challenge, I was trying to do it super simply, just getting videos out where I would record a mix of time-lapse and real-time footage of me painting throughout the day. And when you finish it in one day, it's not actually that much footage. So I may have like a couple stints of me painting live that were like 5 minutes long here or there, maybe like 40 minutes total time throughout the day. And then the rest of it was time-lapse that I barely had to, even if I sped it up a little bit, it would shorten it. But I trimmed all that down to about 10 to 15 minutes. And then in one take, I would just do a voiceover of what I thought was hopeful information of how the painting goes from blank to a finished painting. So I had this extra layer of the January challenge to release a YouTube video of each painting that I did. And these animals were voted on live through Instagram primarily, which got incredible engagement in my stories. So people would come and vote between animal A or animal B, and that's the one I would paint the next day, or mostly the next day. If I was behind by a day or two, it'd be the day after. And people just really liked that format, and I didn't know what I was painting, and they didn't know what I was painting next. And then if they really voted for that animal, or if it was one that they had suggested, people really got invested. And a lot of those paintings get purchased quite quickly when they're like, oh, you picked my animal and it won. And then they swoop them up. So, and I believe you guys have a few of them.
We have three. We have the fox, the polar bear,
And the hawk.
The hawk is the one we commissioned because it's my wife's favorite. It's our favorite animal.
You're like, please paint a red-tailed hawk. And I was like, okay, we'll see if it gets it in the vote. And it did win. So
yeah. And then we were very tickled when we saw that you did an overview of how you painted it. It was, we still are. It's, but yeah. So, and then we have Bruce.
yeah,
We bought Bruce, right? So we call Bruce is this beautiful, I'm not sure what type of cow it is, but it's beautiful.
Is it Highland cow?
Could be.
Yeah.
Could be.
Yeah.
Remember that one?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
We love that. And we call it Sarah. Like we call it Bruce, but it's Sarah's artwork is kind of all over the house. So
Well,
anyway, yeah. So YouTube has been an interesting channel from a marketing perspective to generate, to basically not force you, but you use that content not just to promote the challenge, but also you use that as your Skillshare curriculum. Is that correct?
Well, it made me faster at video editing.
Right.
I had spent about like an entire month of full-time hours, and that's pre-children full-time hours. So that's your obsession late until 10 p.m. at night that you're still video editing, trying to make it perfect. You know, you think about work a bit differently after you have kids. You have to
you do.
carve that time out. But it was just like a very fun way to get faster at video editing and to care less, because what I realized the first time I did a 31-day challenge is perfectionism is the enemy of being a successful artist. You have to accept that you learn the most in the first 70% of a painting and be happy with it at 70% of your like total skill level. If it's a commission and somebody has paid you for your top skill level, that's a bit different. I normally take them a bit higher, especially if they've pre-sold, because I just
Mhm.
get more stressed about it. But at least for the paintings I generate in my studio and put out, it's a bit of a numbers game. So if I can get a painting to 70% done and people think it looks incredible, they're not going to see the little tiny differences I make after that, because they are very tiny. They feel big in my brain, but perfectionism is the enemy. And with video editing too, because you just gotta put content out there and be quick about it so you can get on with the actual main elements of your business that generate money, because YouTube doesn't generate money for me currently still anyway.
Mhm.
But what is really unique about YouTube compared to other social media channels, Instagram, and I briefly had a, stint with TikTok, but it really, I just found it too much and more addictive for me to try and
Mhm.
find. You're like, oh yeah, I'm just going to find a good sound, and then half an hour goes by. So I haven't really been on that app in a while for self-preservation reasons. But
Mhm.
what's unique about YouTube is the content, especially the long form content, not the shorts that I've put on there, still gets viewed. Like, I still get the same amount of comments on old videos as I do newer videos that I have put out. And I haven't put out anything in about probably a year and a half. It was something I was going to pick up once my son got into daycare last December, but I just got too busy with painting and keeping up those commissions. And then, I was only really back full time for 4.5 months before we were expecting again. I got very, very sick again. So
Mhm.
yeah, so it's kind of just like a balance. You can't juggle all the balls at the same time. But what's great about YouTube is passively, I still get about 40 to 50 subscribers a week, which is
Mhm.
kind of unheard of. So, or I think it's a month, but it's just passively growing and passively
Mhm.
still sharing my content. And I have people that are like, hey, I found you on YouTube. Do you still have prints of this painting? And that still exists. And I retire all my prints after a year. So normally a lot of the time is unfortunately no, but here are my new prints that you can choose from
Yeah.
if you're still
Yeah.
interested. But
Yeah.
it's unlike that, because Instagram, you make content and you put out a reel, say, and it burns bright and dies. So YouTube is
Yeah.
kind of fun because you get more bang for your buck of time effort. So yeah.
Do, does your website play a role at all in terms of furthering relationship? Like, how are you using your website in any way that whether it's for e-commerce, or how are you doing that?
Yeah, I set up my website to take sales back in pretty much 2020 when I built it.
Yeah.
Really perfected it in 2021. And definitely, like, I have a monthly card subscription, which was another recommendation from the Artist Academy of a way to stabilize um, your art income. And they did it as mini prints. So people just get mini prints in the mail. But
Mm.
it was my husband's idea with his business set of being like, no, do cards, because people share cards. Whereas these mini prints are just going to end up in a drawer.
Yeah.
And he was so right. The largest commission I've gotten from like the first year I was really painting, like pretty much in 2021, was a couple that were living in near Seattle, and they had gotten one of my wildlife cards of a whale for their birthday mailed to them from Canada.
Mm.
And they left an inquiry on my website for a $5,000 US commission of humpback whales lunch feeding, because they had gone on a trip the year before during COVID when everything was shut down to view lunch feeding humpback whales. And they went all the way up from, Washington to Alaska on their crab fishing trip. So just a buddy and just a guy and his two buddies went, and they had all
Mhm.
these photographs of whales, blurry, distant, and then they had the glaciers. So he asked, like, are these good enough quality that you can do something with? And the example's on my website, but I took all those images and I looked at a lot of other reference images of whales for how their baleen would look, their lighting, and I kind of redesigned that detail to infuse it with more resolution than was in the photographs.
Mhm.
And that's something that like recently I was commissioned to do a painting of a tiger cub that people had raised from a zoo. They had fostered it for a summer. It was from the Wyerton Zoo, which is local. And, the picture had a fence in front of it. It was the last time they saw the tiger when it was about a year before it got transferred to a larger zoo. And they asked me to commission it, and they cried when they saw it. And it was just such a special moment for that, because you can take photographs of older photographs of pets that are maybe gone now and create that detail with my expertise in fur and lighting and being so specialized to animals. And it's really fun to be at that point in my career now where I can like say, absolutely, I can do that photo, and it'll look 10 times better than the photo they give me. So yeah, that's a fun part.
Yeah,
that commission whale one came from a card, which is great to loop back. I keep telling more stories than you need to comment on, but.
Oh no, I love all these stories. These are all things that if you thread them into, how to be an entrepreneur, there's a couple things that stand out. And I'm a big fan of Ash Mora's approach, the running lean approach, where you're doing things like you're doing as little as possible. What's the right word here? A good example is you have a really successful YouTube channel, but it's the success of that channel is defined by you. It's not defined by a social media expert that says you should post every month, every day, every week, to game the algorithm, right? It's just, you know what you want to use a channel for, and it's been successful, and you've got evergreen content on there. It can last. And you don't have to keep updating it, which is one of my concerns about advice that some entrepreneurs get about social media in general is post tons of times, like post on LinkedIn every single minute. In other words, get totally distracted from the things that are going to generate you money. Like you said, I was too busy. What a novel idea. I was too busy to keep my YouTube channel updated. Too busy with customers.
Yeah.
And that's the goal, right? It's an asset of yours, and it's something that, I don't know, you can update it later on. But there are so many people on YouTube, hundreds of millions of people on YouTube who haven't discovered your content yet. So it's new to them. Even if it's a year old, the way that you painted a specific picture, it's not going to change. This is how I painted it. This is how you can paint it. Do you want to buy something from me? But these other little things, these other tactical things that you did, such as your card subscription, just brilliant tactical ideas. And it shows the path to purchase, right? So, hey, somebody referred my art to a couple in the US through a card. That's a referral of some sort. It's a recognition. It's, hey, take a look at this card. I mean, it's a nice gesture, but what the heck? What is this? What is this thing? Who is this Sarah person? Go to the website. Oh my goodness. Blah, 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 blah. Brilliant. So the last part I want to touch, two more things I want to chat with you before I let you go. One is, we talked about starving artists, right? First of all, I when it comes to musicians, when it comes to artists of any type, I just feel so sad thinking that, that they have to they're trying to make ends meet and trying to make a living on something they love to do. And I just wonder, clearly people are getting it. And the artists, there are, starving artists, like that term bothers the hell out of me. Does an artist ever think of themselves as an entrepreneur? And would that entrepreneur ever think of themselves as an artist? So I'll give you my own take on it first, if you don't mind. So creative expression is I think at the core of any artist. It's like you're creatively expressing something. So I play squash professionally still, and I play competitively. And believe it or not, I can't draw. I'm not an artist in that respect. But when I'm on court, I think of myself as creatively expressing my abilities just by way that I play. And this creative expression is something that, you can parlay into a career. You can parlay into being an entrepreneur and making money out of it and still feel good about it, and have a fulfilling life, right?
Yeah, it's the
So
elements of what you love about something that makes you feel alive doing it.
yeah, yeah. So to me, that's the top itch that an entrepreneur wants to scratch. Is some people say, well, what problem is out there that you can solve? What's the biggest itch you want to solve, for yourself as a professional, and build something around, scratching that itch. But the other way to motivate somebody to start their own thing is, what do you love to do, right?
Mhm.
And that's what interests me about you and where you are in your journey, because you've been doing this, what would you say, being a commercial artist, would you say less than 5 years? Around
Um,
5 years?
yeah, less than five, because it would be pretty much, we renovated the triplex that we moved into. So pretty much September 2020 is when I really started taking it seriously and trying things and put a brush to canvas since
So
I wrapped up my master's. So
yeah, so you go from, I've got job offers, I could be a marine biologist, I've done a paper,
two
I'm
papers.
already, I'm 2 papers, I've got my master's. Fuck it, excuse my language, but I'm going to do, and I'm going to be an artist. Like, that's a big decision at a young age, especially getting married, all that sort of stuff. So tell me more about that if you can. Like, there was something in your gut, in your heart, that took you down this path. And then how have you gotten through it? Because to me, I'm just amazed at how you're blending creating really amazing art and running a business. Does that
Okay.
set enough
Yeah,
context for you?
definitely. So I would think that in my mind, I haven't left science, if that makes
Hmm.
sense, because
Yeah.
I talk to scientists all the time. I have friends in science. One of my really good friends that I knew from Dalhousie is now up there with Oceana, Canada, doing amazing research. And I follow all of my friends' career paths, and they asked me to create stickers for Oceana this past February. So that was one of the commissions that I had also in the spring that helped with, getting a mat leave secured and that we could have a second child. So it's fun because I can talk to scientists in a way that makes me still feel connected to them.
Hmm.
And I've painted the Tahanita dolphin in Brazil by cold emailing, basically, the stranding networks on the coast I knew they lived in. So I can use
Hmm.
my science knowledge of their ecology. And I'm like, there's no way there's going to be pictures of them underwater anywhere
Hmm.
because it's murky water and they're so cryptic. They're so hard to spot. So you get
Hmm.
these really secretive animals, but they wash ashore and you can get their body proportions. They may have some wounds that you have to smooth over a little bit, but
Hmm.
the the rescue organization, because I'd done necropsies of whales before. The largest one was a minke whale in Massachusetts, and it's like you're seeing the animals on the table with the rulers, and it's very clinical because they're trying to figure out the cause of death. Eventually, these
Hmm.
are images before the necropsy has started, obviously, but they had a few different animals that they sent me, and I made a picture as if they're swimming in a pod together. And
Hmm.
you got to change the angle of some fins so it doesn't look like they're on a table, but I feel like I'm using my science knowledge and my understanding of animals every time I design a painting still, for the most part. Sometimes there's a
Hmm.
really good image and I don't really have to change it much. And that's when I'm more focusing on like the technical skill of recreating lighting and fur, because you have to have a bit of both. And it's it's a balance in your career of accepting jobs that are easy, like straight from a reference photo. That's an easy painting. If I'm doing a lot of the design work and changing, you know, expressions of the animals' faces and other things, it takes a lot more thinking. So it's a lot more
Hmm.
slower to paint. Um, and it's just a bit of a balance. But yeah, it's really fun to be like, I don't feel like I've left it behind. I feel
No,
like
I
I
see
just
that.
write and rewrite, the same sentence over and over again. So I feel like I've
Yeah.
got to take the best parts of science with me, and I still go for walks and try and, photograph local species. I did a talk on penguins at the Huron Fringe Birding Festival, which is a local festival, and I love getting invited to local talks. It's just so fun for me to talk about the penguin research. That's kind of what people want to hear about the most. But then I always, whip it at the end into using art for conservation. And I always have that hook in there to what I'm doing currently. But at the Huron Fringe Birding Festival, I went with these lifelong birders, and I don't know much about Ontario bird species, but I learned so much. And now we have a project that I'm probably not going to end up doing this fall, but it's in the back burner. But I think there's 8 different wildlife photographers collaborating on it thus far, and we're collecting all the warbler species. So I'm going to do a painting of all the warblers that migrate through Ontario, so that it's like an ID poster for all of the ones that we can see, because there's nothing like that exists, and it's fun to put them all in the same frame. But that's a complicated thing, because you got to change lighting and all this other stuff. But it's great to work with local birders and scientists and researchers and create things that are going to be useful to the community here. Yeah. But so I feel like I still use my science knowledge, so I didn't fully leave it behind.
Yeah, I don't think you have at all. In fact, you have a lot of strong relationships and connections and people that you respect and who respect you in the science community, who want to stay engaged with you and vice versa, just because of the natural interest in animal protection and all that sort of stuff. And it's really interesting, really interesting. I find people like I find I had a situation where I sat down one time, and as I said, I play squash, and I never really realized what something like having somebody to play with in squash really could potentially mean outside of just having a good game of squash. So an example was, I was sitting down with a gentleman. I said, just, what do you do? And he said, I'm a venture capitalist. And he said, oh, interesting. So the net gain of that was he eventually hired MI6 to help, and he brought me into one of his companies that he invested in. And he said to the CEO, I want you to hire MI6 because we're going to get the company ready for an exit. So for about a year and a half, MI6 did everything that we needed to do in order to prepare them for exit, and then they got sold. So I never thought about how one network can sort of trip into areas that you never ever thought would evolve in terms of opportunity and relationships.
Absolutely. And when you're in a small town, more people cheer for you. There's a support system that you gain that you don't necessarily have when you're a number in a larger city.
True.
So there are no wildlife artists no other member of Artists for Conservation anyway, that are in our immediate area. So it's kind of like you're unique in your setting. Edward Safiro, he's got a gallery in Niagara on the Lake, which is absolutely incredible if you are ever down that direction. And he's been a lifelong artist. He actually does something really cool in his business. To pivot for a quick moment, he has his photographs he takes. He loves African animals, so he goes on trips there and organizes trips that he guides as well. But he has his favorite photographs on his wall in his gallery that people can come in, and the photographs have red dots on them. So he has like a 2 to 3 year wait list on his artwork because the photographs that he likes are already sold. Isn't that crazy? So he's.
What do you mean he has a red dot? So like, what do the red dots mean? That somebody's.
So typically in a gallery show, if a painting sells, you put a red dot on the tag. And that means that the painting's unavailable. It's bought, but it's not released to them yet. So for example, for the Artists for Conservation show, paintings were selling, but they're there the whole weekend. So so people can take them home, but they're on contract with Artists for Conservation. And I think they have another tour after that the whole collection will be exhibited together.
Mm-hmm.
And it's what I did in March. Some of my paintings had sold in January and February, but when I had my March show with Anne at the Great Gallery, the whole collection was together.
Right.
So you can see it all, even though some paintings are going to go, they've already found good homes to take them.
Yeah.
But so he's selling paintings before they're even painted.
Oh, okay.
Years in advance, but they're the photographs that he's taken that he wanted to paint.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
So he had a sticker for saying like currently working on, and then that's the one you can see. He kind of has a loft area that overlooks his public gallery that he's up there. So he's painting and still has the privacy, so he's not interrupted in his work, but people can kind of see him being like, oh, there he is, he's working.
Oh, that's interesting. That's really cool.
Yeah. Like sometimes like if there's the representatives that are working on his gallery floor, we'll bring people up to, say hi and meet him. And sometimes he comes down and wanders, of course, but it's a good way for him to still get work done, because if you're just in the store the whole time, you're never going to paint anything.
You never get, you'll be busy, interrupted. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, Sarah. One last question.
Sure.
And it's for a budding, and you decide if it's you decide how you want to answer this in the context of an artist first or an entrepreneur first or both. It doesn't really matter. So if somebody wants to be head towards a path of being a commercial artist, what advice would you give them, regardless of their age? But they're just starting out. They're thinking about it. They're not sure whether they should do it. What advice would you give them?
I would say a low-cost trial run is the best way to go, and a way to grow your skills without being financially dependent on that income, and building it up. So for example, this could look like if somebody's really going to take it seriously, get a website. I go with Squarespace. I think the platform I'm with costs maybe $110 a month. I also get my email list is all through them too, so I can link stuff really quick. So then I have to have my email list, my Squarespace, and it's at a level of operability where people can buy stuff right off your website. So I link it with my Stripe account. So have a way that you can put up your artwork that's for sale. It could be one picture of a cell phone picture. Don't get into details with that. Get a price on it and have it that people can buy stuff through your website. It saves you logistically a lot of effort. Also through that, you can set up something like a card subscription. Nobody chooses what my card subscription is, but with the money that people purchase it from, I think it's about $400 now. It wasn't at the beginning though. It basically covered my monthly expenses. So you can have a monthly card subscription, even just with your friends and families. Mine are $8 if you're a subscriber. You can even start with $5. And it's kind of like a Patreon, but people know exactly what the transaction is. So it's not like a Patreon where you have to put a lot of time and effort into a bunch of videos and think about how to keep people subscribed. It's very clear terms. They will get a card in the month of your choice, but they will have a monthly card things, and people get them written out to their children. So I have a friend that their 7-year-old gets my card and they immediately open it and write a letter to someone they love, and then they mail it off together. And that's nice. Just their system. So it's great. And it's a very simple way that you could do even little doodles and then turn that into a card. And, I use Vistaprint for them. I get the Italian linen paper, so it's a gooder quality paper, but it still costs like maybe $1.50 for the card. And they have sales sometimes for like 40% off on their cards. But you can do that. And I always get about 10 extra cards than I have subscribers. So that's a way that it still is all paid for. I'm not spending my extra cash flow on increasing my cards. But now when I go to shows, I have a little bucket of cards that I can sell on hand for cash, or through, e-transfer or whatever. And it's like a mini portfolio that I can take places, doesn't take up much space. But if you ever have a booth anywhere, that's such an easy thing that you can build off on, and you can sell your originals that way. I wouldn't worry about prints. Prints actually don't make me much money. It's all through my original painting, basically. I reduced my print edition down to only 5 per thing because they just don't sell that well. But I want to keep the option there for people who are in different financial brackets, because my originals have gotten quite expensive. So I like the idea of people who have been supporting me to have access to my work as prints. But that's also why I end up donating even more than 15% from my prints, because it's a lot of effort to produce them, and it feels more worth it if it's going to conservation than if it's just like, do I want to do all this effort for an $80 margin? Kind of no. So,
yeah, true.
yeah, it makes it more worth the effort for that. But it's always good to have good images of your stuff on your site and things. But that's what I would do. So you could be a student, but get a website up. That way, if you make a new painting, you can turn it into a card for that month. You can put it up as a print, and you can start an email list and just slowly build those things up. Like, you can tell people that you have an email list, but if you want to post that image on Instagram, you have the links being like, this is available on my website. And then if anybody wants it, they can go straight to there. It's less talking to you, kind of, which is not a bad thing. But it's like, some people just want to go, and if it's the buy now button's there, they're just going to click it. Like, purchasing is an impulsive thing. So the easier you can make it for people, the more sales happen.
Sarah, it's been great speaking with you. I'm so happy for your success to date, and for and to learn about another little one on the way. Congratulations to you and Spencer, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much. We're very excited.
Thanks a lot again.